Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. Now, WandaVision is finally over, so I thought I'd bring you guys a series review since there's obviously not going to be any more seasons. I thought I could give you guys my final verdict and specific things that I really liked or disliked about the show. If you guys haven't already checked out my finale review, you can click up here. You can check that out if you haven't already watched it. In that video, I go more into depth as to what I loved about the episode as well as some stuff that I didn't really like. Episode 9 was definitely my favorite and it capped off an amazing show. Obviously, the main premise of WandaVision was just Wanda's character becoming developed and honestly becoming more mature. We started to realize how much Wanda accepted her grief. Throughout this series, we saw Wanda running from the truth. Wanda was so powerful that she created a figmented reality as to what she wanted in life. This was caused by all of the pain around her and the fact that she had no one next to her to actually help her go through all of these things. Now, one other thing that kind of correlates to all this is just emotional development overall. Wanda starts to come to terms. She starts to accept what must be done. She accepts the fact that she needs to let everyone go. So from a story arc perspective, obviously we follow Wanda most of the show, and I think it did a perfect job just because of how deep they went into Wanda's character. And as we saw in the post-credit scene, we're not done seeing Wanda. Wanda's gonna be playing a major role in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So moving past Wanda and her emotions and all that kind of stuff, just development for Wanda, I want to talk about the villain. Now, we didn't really know necessarily the villain for this show. At first, I thought maybe it was going to be Mephisto because Agnes kept hyping up the character Ralph, and it just turns out that Ralph was a puppet that Wanda made. That Agnes made, and then Agnes turned him into Quicksilver so Quicksilver could get intel for Agnes. I definitely felt like her character was super rushed. I think that if they started to show more of Agnes's backstory in maybe 1 or 2 episodes earlier, it would have been much better. But we definitely started to see suspicious stuff happening with Agnes's character after the Halloween episode specifically. I definitely didn't think Agnes was the greatest villain that they could have chosen. Obviously, they could have gone one step further up with Mephisto, but I think that Agnes was the perfect choice in terms of, again, completing Wanda's storyline, because it also made Wanda think about how powerful she was herself. And then we saw in the post-credit scene, Wanda wants to learn how to use the spells, and Agnes kind of started the process of teaching her, because remember, during that final battle, Wanda used something that Agnes told her against her. So again, I thought Agnes was an above average villain, but I don't think she was anything crazy. On the other hand, she did work perfectly for Wanda's storyline and development. Now, the next thing, and probably the second biggest thing in this entire series, is Vision's character arc. Now, Vision's entire point in this show was honestly just to be confused. He was the main reason why Wanda created Westview in the first place. She just wanted to live her life with Vision, and she was doing it all out of pain. We saw Vision learning stuff about Westview and kind of becoming suspicious, but Wanda never knew until one point and later on in the episodes, when especially the first time she genuinely figured out that Vision was actually catching on is when he left the Westview bubble, or when he left the Hex in episode 6. And Vision's intentions were good throughout the entire show. He always wanted to make sure that Wanda was fine, and he wanted to find out what pain Wanda was going through. We saw this in the flashbacks in episode 8 when Civil War flashback, and we saw Vision kind of trying to understand what Wanda was going through. We saw this, I think, it was episode 3 in the 70s episode when he was reading the book about pregnancy to kind of find out what Wanda was going through and what pain she was going through. And even in this episode, early on in this episode, when Wanda and Vision meet each other for the first time since I think it was episode 6 when Vision tried to leave the Hex, Vision says, "I understand what you did." And before the Hex rolls over Wanda's house, we see Vision's character arc finally coming to an end when he figures out what he actually is. Wanda goes on and she gets super deep and she explains what Vision means to her, and that is when I cried in this episode. I did shed a tear, and I'll be honest with you. Now, moving past Vision, which is again one of my favorite things that happened in this show, just his character development overall and just everything his character meant in the story. But moving past that, I want to talk about the side characters. Now, before this episode, I was definitely really mad about the show and the way it was dealing with side characters. I thought honestly that they were just going to put them to the side, but that's not what happened. They actually used all 3 of the side characters. They each played a slightly significant role in their own way, and I think it was a perfect way to cap off each of their storylines. Monica is going to get introduced, or she's going to have a big role in Secret Invasion, hopefully. Well, that's at least what the first post-credit scene leads us to think. And honestly, Darcy had a big role too. She saved everyone by basically crashing into Hayward's car, and then Jimmy Woo was the one who called in the safety and all of that when he was getting arrested. Overall, I just really like what they did with all the side characters and how they concluded their storylines. They didn't have any major impacts, but they had enough impact on the episode to make them actually feel useful. Now, I think the biggest thing overall, and when you look in general of the show, is the sitcom aspect. Now, we saw the sitcom aspect for the first 3 episodes. The 4th episode, we didn't necessarily see it that much, but we still saw it towards the end. And then episode 5 and 6, we saw a little bit more of that sitcom feel. Now, personally, I love the sitcom feel, and I like the way that the show transitioned from sitcom to a mix of sitcom and reality, and then fully in reality. I thought that entire aspect of just a sitcom in general was super unique in the beginning, but the way they played it out and the way that they made everything shift over time just made the show 10 times better. One of my only negative things about this series as a whole is just the pacing. It felt at sometimes it went way too slow and sometimes it went way too fast. Now, obviously last episode is supposed to be a backstory, so we can understand this episode and the emotional aspects of this finale even more, and it makes sense because this episode felt so much more rushed than it should have been. Right from the beginning, we got so much action, and this episode never really stopped. Again, that's like the only issue I have is just that sometimes it felt too rushed and sometimes I felt like they were taking it too slow. Now, I haven't really mentioned this in any of my past reviews or reactions or any sort of video for WandaVision, but I definitely think that Elizabeth Olsen deserves an award for playing Wanda in this show. She played 6 different variations of the same exact character and was awesome in every single version. Overall, her performance was just legendary, and this is one that I'll never forget. So my final thought for this show as a series in general is that it was one of my favorite pieces of Marvel content that I've ever seen. This show has set such a high bar, and honestly, maybe it's just a high bar because it's Marvel and they usually do the same stuff over and over, and this show is like one of the first super unique things they've done. This series really shows that there's a possibility for a dark future in the MCU, especially going off of Multiverse of Madness. I couldn't be more excited for the future of Marvel, and this show explains just why. And yeah guys, that's it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to drop a like ring down below. Share with your friends if you did enjoy. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn notifications on so you don't miss a single video that I drop on the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.